He dismissed her as the token female, a quiet presence in a room of warriors. He never imagined he was mocking a legendary combat surgeon. The next day, her 5 Purple Hearts would do the talking. The air in the briefing room at the JSOC Advanced Warfighting Center was thick with ambition. It was a sterile, windowless space where the nation's sharpest military minds were forged, and it smelled of industrial-strength coffee and quiet competition. Seated amongst the confident, athletic frames of Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Delta Force operators was Dr. Evelyn Reed. At 30, with calm, analytical blue eyes and auburn hair pulled back into a severe, regulation bun, she was an island of stillness in a sea of restless energy. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture perfect, but she radiated an academic aura that felt jarringly out of place. Master Sergeant Croft, a man carved from granite and institutional cynicism, stood at the front of the room. His eyes, honed by decades of service, swept across his new students, cataloging, assessing, and judging. When they landed on Eve, they lingered for a fraction of a second too long, a subtle but unmistakable flicker of dismissal in their depths. "Welcome to the Strategic Operations Seminar," Croft's voice boomed, a gravelly instrument of command. "In this room, we dissect the anatomy of victory and defeat. We require scalpels here, minds that can cut to the bone of a problem. We have no use for band-aids." A few officers exchanged knowing glances. The message, though indirect, was clear. Eve opened her notebook, her pen poised. She had heard variations of this speech before. It was the standard territorial marking of a man who believed valor was measured in decibels and scar tissue. Croft began to pace, his presence dominating the room. "Over the next 8 weeks, you will be pushed to your absolute limits. You will be broken down and, if you are worthy, rebuilt into something stronger. We will separate the warriors from the academics." He paused, his gaze finding Eve again. "Ma'am," he said, the honorific dripping with condescension, "I trust you'll be able to keep up." Eve met his gaze without flinching. "I'll do my best, Master Sergeant." Her voice was quiet, even, betraying no hint of emotion. This seemed to irritate Croft more than any argument would have. He saw her composure not as discipline, but as passivity. He saw a novice, a box checker sent by some out-of-touch command to fill a quota. The day wore on, a grueling marathon of advanced tactical theory and geopolitical analysis. Eve spoke only when called upon, her answers concise, accurate, and utterly devoid of personal opinion. She absorbed everything, her pen moving across the page in a neat, steady script. As the session concluded, Croft delivered his final instructions. "Tomorrow, we begin with service history presentations. You will stand before this class and detail your operational contributions. Your record, your deployments, your commendations. It is a time for transparency." He scanned the faces of the operators, a grim smile touching his lips. Then, his eyes locked onto Eve's. "It will be an opportunity to distinguish the true warfighters from those who have only read about the fight." The challenge was laid bare, a gauntlet thrown directly at her feet. That evening, the fluorescent lights of Eve's Spartan quarters hummed, a stark contrast to the silence within. The room was anonymous, furnished with only a bed, a desk, and a steel locker, a space designed for transient soldiers, not for reflection. But for Eve, memories were not tied to places, they were carried within. She laid out her uniform for the next day, the crisp fabric of familiar comfort. From the bottom of her duffel bag, she retrieved a worn, dark brown leather roll, its surface softened and scarred by years of travel. It was held together by a simple leather tie. This was not a standard issue item. It was personal. Untying the knot, she unrolled it on her desk. The soft suede interior revealed a series of small, stitched pockets. 5 of them were occupied. The sight of the medals, even in the sterile light, was enough to pull her back. The hum of the lights faded, replaced by the deafening roar of rotor blades and the high-pitched shriek of incoming fire. The memory hit her not as a thought, but as a full-body sensation. The violent lurch of the Black Hawk. The smell of hydraulic fluid and hot metal. The world outside the gunner's window, a spinning vortex of sand and smoke. "We're hit. Going down hard," the pilot's voice, strained and tinny through the comms. The impact was a cataclysm of noise and force. Eve's head slammed against the bulkhead. The world went white, then black, then a kaleidoscope of pain. When consciousness returned, it was to a symphony of chaos, the crackle of flames, the groans of the wounded, the pinging of hot, contracting metal. A searing pain radiated from her side. She looked down. A piece of shrapnel, a jagged shard of the helicopter's fuselage, was embedded in her abdomen. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, cut through the fog. Her training took over. Triage. Assess. Act. 2 pilots were unconscious, slumped over the controls. The crew chief was pinned, his leg crushed. She was the only one moving. Ignoring the fire licking at the edges of the cabin, she went to the nearest pilot, her fingers expertly finding his carotid artery. A pulse. Weak, but there. She unbuckled him, the heat from the fire scorching her cheek. She wrapped her arms around his chest and dragged. He was dead weight, a mountain of gear and limp muscle. Every pull sent a fresh wave of agony through her own wound, but she gritted her teeth and heaved, pulling him inch by agonizing inch toward the mangled door and out onto the sand. 1 down. The flames were roaring now, feeding on the fuel. She turned back, her lungs screaming for air in the smoke-filled cabin. She crawled to the second pilot, the fire so close it singed her hair. She got him free and dragged him out, collapsing beside the first just as a fuel cell erupted, engulfing the wreckage in a ball of white-hot fire. She blinked, the sterile room slowly coming back into focus. Her hand instinctively went to her side, tracing the faint outline of the scar beneath her uniform. That had been her second Purple Heart. She hadn't thought about the medal. She had only thought about the 2 lives she had pulled from the fire. The other 3 medals had similar stories, each a testament to a day when the world had dissolved into blood and duty. She picked up one of the medals, its familiar weight cool in her palm. She hadn't displayed them in years. They weren't trophies, they were receipts. Proof of payment for the lives she had been able to save. Tomorrow, however, would be different. Tomorrow, they would not be memories. They would be a statement. The next day, the classroom simmered with a mix of anticipation and bravado. One by one, the officers stood and presented. They spoke of deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, of Bronze Stars for valor, of leading platoons through complex operations. Master Sergeant Croft presided over it all like a proud, discerning father, offering nods of approval and sharp, insightful questions. Lieutenant Hayes, a young, ambitious officer with a chiseled jaw and an air of invincibility, presented an impressive record, culminating in a Silver Star. A textbook ambush, Master Sergeant, he concluded. We neutralized the threat and completed the mission. That's the standard we expect here, Lieutenant, Croft beamed. Action. Decisiveness. Well done. The bar was set high. The collective gaze of the room, heavy with expectation and a hint of mockery, finally turned to Eve. Dr. Reed, Croft called out, a touch of theatrical weariness in his tone. Let's see what you've got. Eve stood and walked to the front of the room. Her movements were unhurried, economical. She placed the worn leather roll on the lectern. The room quieted, the faint rustle of uniforms and quiet coughs ceasing. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed, she began, her voice steady and clear, easily filling the silent space. My former unit was the Surgical Augmentation Detachment, attached to Joint Special Operations Command. A few eyebrows raised. It was a unit designation none of them had ever heard of. Croft's expression tightened, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. Eve said nothing more. Instead, she slowly untied the leather cord and unfurled the roll. Lying nestled in the soft suede were 5 medals. 5 Purple Hearts. She carefully took them out, one by one, and arranged them in a neat, gleaming row on the polished wood of the lectern. The morning light caught the gold and purple, making them shine with an almost holy light against the dark wood. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated shock. 5. The number was impossible. It was the stuff of military legend, of historical archives. Not something you saw laid out on a desk by a quiet, 30-year-old woman. Someone in the back whispered an expletive, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. Lieutenant Hayes, the Silver Star recipient, sat with his mouth slightly agape, his own impressive record suddenly feeling insignificant. Croft stared, his face a mask of disbelief. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving behind a pale, waxy sheen. He took a half-step forward, as if drawn by an invisible force, his eyes locked on the 5 medals. That's not possible," he stammered, his voice losing its booming authority, shrinking to a hoarse whisper. He looked from the medals to Eve's calm, unreadable face. "Those are real." Eve met his stunned gaze. "Each one represents a mission I was medically evacuated from," she stated simply. "And each one represents a mission I completed before being evacuated." The statement hung in the air, its implications staggering. She hadn't just survived 5 separate woundings in combat. She had stayed in the fight, doing her job, until she was physically pulled from the field. Croft was speechless. His entire framework for judging a soldier, his entire worldview, was crumbling before his eyes. The novice, the academic, the woman he had dismissed with such casual arrogance, possessed a combat record that surpassed anyone in that room, including himself. The cheerleader had just revealed herself to be the team captain, the coach, and the Hall of Famer, all rolled into one. Master Sergeant Croft dismissed the class early, his voice strained, his usual ironclad composure shattered. The stunned officers filed out in near silence, the atmosphere thick with a new, profound respect for the woman they had so easily misjudged. We follow Croft as he storms back to his office, slamming the door behind him. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the secure phone. He bypassed his immediate superior and dialed the direct line to the base commander, Colonel Wallace. "Sir, it's Master Sergeant Croft," he said, his voice tight. "I have a situation in the Strategic Ops seminar. I need immediate verification on a Dr. Evelyn Reed. She just presented 5 Purple Hearts." In his command suite across the base, Colonel Wallace, a man who had seen nearly everything in his 30-year career, paused. "Say again, Master Sergeant." 5, sir." She laid out 5 of them. A long silence stretched over the secure line. "I'm looking at her file now, Croft. Most of it is blacked out, even for me." Wallace's fingers flew across his keyboard, entering his highest security credentials. One by one, digital locks began to open, revealing layers of classified information that had been sealed at the highest levels. His eyes widened. He read through mission codenames he recognized only from top-secret intelligence briefings: Operation Sunset Talon, Operation Iron Viper. He saw after-action reports detailing field surgeries performed under direct enemy fire, commendations for valor signed by the legendary General Thompson himself, and a final psychological evaluation that described her resilience as bordering on superhuman. "My God," Wallace whispered to himself. He picked up another phone, the one that connected directly to the Pentagon. "Get me General Thompson's office. Now." Minutes later, he was speaking to the 4-star general who commanded all of JSOC. "General, Colonel Wallace at the Warfighting Center. I'm calling about Dr. Reed." General Thompson's voice came through the line, clipped and authoritative, with no room for pleasantries. "Wallace. I was wondering when you'd call. Has she presented yet?" "Sir, she has. It's caused quite a stir." Master Sergeant Croft was unaware of her full background. A humorless chuckle echoed down the line. "Unaware is the point, Colonel. We sent her there to see how she'd integrate without her reputation preceding her. It was an evaluation, for her, and for your instructors." The general's tone hardened. "Let me be perfectly clear. You have one of the most decorated and effective combat surgeons of the last decade sitting in your classroom. Her practical knowledge of battlefield trauma and casualty evacuation under extreme duress is unparalleled. She is a national asset." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I trust you and your staff will make the appropriate adjustments. Don't screw this up, Colonel." The line went dead. Colonel Wallace slowly placed the receiver back in its cradle. He stared at the wall, at the framed flags and unit citations. He had a serious problem, and its name was Master Sergeant Croft. He buzzed his aide. "Get me Croft. In my office. 5 minutes ago." The next morning, an unspoken tension gripped the classroom. The officers sat straighter, their notebooks open, their eyes fixed on the door. When it opened, it wasn't Master Sergeant Croft who entered, but Colonel Wallace himself. Flanking him was Dr. Evelyn Reed. "At ease," the colonel said, his voice calm but firm. He waited for the rustle of movement to cease. "Yesterday, this class was given a powerful, unscheduled lesson in one of the military's core tenets: never judge a soldier by their appearance. We, as an institution, failed that test." He turned his gaze to Croft, who had entered behind him and now stood stiffly by the wall. "Master Sergeant Croft." "Sir. You have something to say to Dr. Reed." Croft stepped forward, his face pale but his posture rigid. He faced Eve, and for the first time, he looked her directly in the eye, not as a subordinate or a woman, but as a peer he had wronged. "Dr. Reed," he began, his voice clear and formal. "My conduct yesterday was unprofessional and unacceptable. My assumptions were based on prejudice, not fact. I offer you my unequivocal and sincere apology." Eve simply nodded once. "Apology accepted, Master Sergeant." Furthermore, Colonel Wallace interjected, stepping forward. "Effective immediately, Dr. Reed's role in this seminar is changing. She will no longer be a student, but a special advisor on tactical medicine and field operations." The real shift, however, came 2 days later. The class was engaged in a complex wargaming scenario, a hostage rescue mission gone wrong. The simulation had thrown them a curveball. The primary hostage was critically wounded, trapped in a collapsed structure, and conventional extraction was impossible. The room's top minds were stumped. Every solution they proposed was deemed too slow, too risky. Croft, frustrated, paced at the front of the room. After 10 minutes of dead-end debate, he stopped. The room fell silent. He turned, his pride warring with the pragmatic need for a solution. He looked at Eve, who had been observing quietly from the side. "Dr. Reed," he said, the name now carrying the full weight of respect. "Your assessment." Eve walked to the holographic map. She didn't hesitate. "The standard casevac protocol is irrelevant here. You're trying to move a patient to a surgeon. Instead, move the surgeon to the patient." In less than 60 seconds, she laid out a plan. A 2-man engineering team to stabilize a single entry point. A single medic, her, to go in with a lightweight surgical kit to perform a damage control thoracotomy on site. A new, unconventional extraction path using a pulley system through a service tunnel they had all overlooked. It was brilliant. It was audacious. It was something no textbook could ever teach. It was a solution born from the blood and chaos of real-world experience. The room was silent again, but this time, it was the silence of awe. In that moment, Eve's authority was cemented not by the 5 medals in her leather roll, but by the undeniable power of her mind. The shift was complete. The final week's comprehensive field exercise was the culmination of the entire program. There was no debate about who would serve as mission commander. When Master Sergeant Croft announced Eve's name, the room responded with a unified nod of assent. Under her command, the team performed with a level of precision and cohesion that the evaluators noted as exceptional. Eve's plan was a masterclass in strategy, seamlessly integrating tactical aggression with medical foresight. She anticipated enemy movements, planned for contingencies no one else saw, and led with a quiet confidence that inspired absolute trust. After the successful conclusion of the exercise, Croft approached her privately, away from the celebrating officers. The setting sun cast long shadows across the training ground. "Dr. Reed," he began, his tone stripped of all its former arrogance. "For 30 years, I've been teaching soldiers. I thought I had nothing left to learn." He looked her in the eye, his expression one of genuine humility. "You taught me a lesson I thought I was too old to learn. About judgment. About what a true warrior looks like. Thank you." Eve extended her hand. "We all have our fields of expertise, Master Sergeant. We all have lessons to learn." A few weeks later, official orders arrived. As expected, they directed Dr. Evelyn Reed to Officer Candidate School. The recommendation was signed personally by General Thompson. That night, as she packed her gear for the new assignment, she once again unrolled the leather pouch. She polished each of the 5 purple hearts before carefully placing them back in their pockets. Before she tied the roll, her gaze fell upon a faded photograph she kept tucked in a hidden flap. It was a picture of her and her first surgical team, taken before their deployment on Operation Sunset Talon. Young, smiling faces, full of life. Some of them never came home. Her quiet strength, the medals, the new assignment, it was never for her own glory. It was for them. To honor their sacrifice by continuing to serve, to heal, to lead. The medals were just receipts for a debt she felt she could never fully repay. Fort Lancer had been a test she hadn't asked for, but like every other, she had met it, endured it, and emerged stronger, leaving a lesson in her wake that would not soon be forgotten. The story of Dr. Reed is a powerful reminder that the greatest strength is often the quietest, and heroes rarely fit the molds we create for them. What does the word warrior mean to you? Is it about physical strength, or the courage to endure and serve? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We believe every perspective adds value, so please, comment with respect. If this story of quiet heroism resonated with you, show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with others, and subscribing for more narratives that challenge our assumptions.